A kid at the park ran up to my husband and said, "Daddy, you forgot your other phone at our house. We don't know this child." I watched my husband's face turn completely white as this little girl with pigtails tugged on his jacket sleeve. She looked about 5 years old with big brown eyes and a gap-toothed smile. "Who is this?" I asked, looking between them. The girl giggled. "I'm Peyton, silly. Daddy, why is this lady here?" My husband stammered something incomprehensible while I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Our own daughter was sitting on the swings 20 feet away, completely unaware that her father apparently had another child. "Sweetheart, I think you have the wrong person," my husband said, his voice cracking. The little girl's face scrunched up. "No, I don't. You're my daddy. You were just at our house yesterday." A woman came running over looking panicked. She grabbed the little girl's hand and started apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry. She just ran off. Peyton, we talked about this." But then the woman looked at my husband and her face changed. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed immediately by terror. "We need to go," she said quickly, pulling the child away. "Wait," I called out. "How does your daughter know my husband?" The woman walked faster. My husband grabbed my arm. "Let's just go home. This is clearly a misunderstanding." I followed the woman to her car while she tried to buckle a confused Peyton into her car seat. "Please," I said. "I need to know what's going on." The woman turned with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't know he was married. I swear I didn't know. He told me he was divorced." The world stopped spinning. "How long?" I whispered. 6 years. Peyton just turned 5. I did the math. We had been married for 12 years. Our daughter was 10. He had been living a double life for half our marriage. I walked back to where my husband stood frozen. Our daughter noticed something was wrong and was walking toward us looking worried. "Mommy? Daddy? What's happening?" I looked at my husband and saw a stranger wearing his face. "Take Lily home," I said calmly. "I need to think. Please let me explain," he begged. "There's nothing to explain. You have another daughter. A whole other family. What could you possibly say?" My husband drove away with our daughter, and I sat on a park bench feeling like my entire life had been a lie. The other woman approached slowly and sat beside me. Her name was Gemma. She told me everything. They had met at a conference when Peyton was conceived. He had told her he was divorced with no kids. He visited them every other weekend claiming work trips. He paid for their apartment, bought Peyton birthday presents, attended her dance recitals. He had been father of the year to a child I didn't know existed. I went home and found my husband sitting in the dark living room. Lily was asleep upstairs. "How could you do this?" I asked. He didn't have a good answer. Something about falling in love with two people. Something about getting in too deep to get out. I filed for divorce the next week. During the proceedings, Gemma and I discovered even more lies. He had taken out a second mortgage on our house to pay for their apartment. He had missed Lily's school plays for Peyton's birthday parties. The judge was not sympathetic. My husband lost everything. The house went to me. He was ordered to pay child support for both daughters, which left him broke. Gemma and I started talking regularly after the divorce. Not about him, but about our girls. They were half-sisters after all. It felt wrong to keep them apart because their father was a liar. Last month, we arranged for Lily and Peyton to meet for the first time. They became instant best friends. They have the same laugh and the same way of tilting their heads when thinking. Now we do monthly dinners together. 2 moms, 2 daughters, 0 fathers present. Lily asked me once why daddy had another family. I told her sometimes grown-ups make terrible choices and hurt people they love. She thought about it, then said, "Well, at least I got a sister out of it." Watching them chase each other around laughing, something beautiful grew from something ugly. And that is the best revenge. My ex-husband calls sometimes asking to see the girls. We let him have supervised visits once a month. He shows up looking defeated. The man who once juggled 2 families now struggles to maintain a relationship with either daughter. Lily told me she doesn't hate him but doesn't trust him. Peyton barely remembers when he lived with them. Children are perceptive. They know when someone has betrayed their family. Gemma and I have become closer than sisters. Our daughters are growing up together, building a new bond that lasts. At family dinner, my sister yelled from across the table, "Are you lying about having cancer?" My sister pointed directly at my husband, Finn. Everyone stopped eating. I almost laughed. "What are you talking about? Why would he fake having cancer for 2 years?" Finn didn't move. Sweat was forming on his forehead. I looked at him. "Right, baby?" He said nothing. My sister reached into her bag and pulled out 5 pill bottles. She lined them up on the table one by one. "I found these in the back of your closet." She looked at Finn. "These are dated from the last 2 years. These are your vital chemo pills. Every single one is full. You haven't taken a single dose." My heart started pounding. I turned to my husband. "Finn, why aren't you taking your chemo pills? You told me you were." He wouldn't look at me. My sister kept going. "I'm a nurse, Finn. I've watched cancer patients die. I've held their hands while chemo destroyed their bodies." She pointed at him. "You've gained 20 pounds. Your hair grew back. You carried furniture last month." Finn's voice cracked. "The treatment is working. That's why I look healthier." "Then why aren't you taking the pills?" Silence. I stood up slowly. My whole body was shaking. "I quit my job, Finn." My voice came out barely a whisper. "I quit my job to take care of you." He looked at me for the first time. "Baby, please let me explain. I drained my savings. $60,000 for your treatments." My mother spoke up. "We gave you 40,000. Your father worked overtime for 8 months." My dad's face was turning red. He didn't say a word, just stared at Finn. I kept going. I put my entire life on hold. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped sleeping. I've had anxiety attacks every night for 2 years because I thought my husband was dying. Finn stood up. His hands were shaking. "I was going through something. I needed support." "You needed what?" I was screaming now. "You needed me to destroy myself? You needed my family's money? For what, Finn?" We all knew he was guilty, but then it got worse. My sister's voice dropped low. "Is this about Lola?" The room went dead silent. Finn's face changed. My heart stopped. Lola was our daughter. She drowned in the bathtub 18 months ago. Finn was home with her. He said it happened so fast. Said he tried to save her. Then he got diagnosed 3 months later. I looked at my sister. "What about Lola?" She pulled out a folder. "I requested the autopsy report. I've read it 5 times." She opened it. "Finn told us he found her and called 911 immediately, that she was only alone for a minute." Finn moved toward her. "Give me that." My father blocked him. "Sit down." My sister kept reading. "Time of death was approximately 6:15 p.m. The 911 call came in at 7:03 p.m. She looked up. "That's 48 minutes, Finn." My legs gave out. I grabbed the table to stay standing. My sister's voice was shaking. "The report says she could have been resuscitated within the first 15 minutes. She didn't have to die." I couldn't breathe. "What were you doing for 48 minutes?" Finn was crying. "It's not what you think." I panicked. I didn't know what to do. "You let our daughter die." The words came out of me like glass. "You let her die and then you lied about it." My sister pulled out her phone. "There's more. A text you sent to your brother 20 minutes after she died." She read it out loud. "I messed up. I fell asleep while Lola was in the bathtub. I don't know what to do. I can't tell my wife. She'll never forgive me." My mother let out a sob. I stared at Finn. Finn. You killed our daughter, then faked cancer? My sister held up another screenshot. I also found a bank account under just your name, with $95,000 in it. That's almost exactly what we all gave you. My father finally spoke. Where was the money going? Finn said nothing. My sister answered for him. One-way flight to Costa Rica. Booked for next month. Apartment deposit paid 2 weeks ago. You were going to run. It all clicked. He killed our daughter, faked cancer so no one would question him, collected our money, and was going to disappear before we figured it out. I felt something in me snap. You were never going to tell me. Finn looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't deny it. I didn't know how. Something in me snapped. My fist hit his mouth. He stumbled. I grabbed his shirt and hit him again. You killed my baby! My sister pulled me off. Stop. You'll catch a charge. Let the police handle him. She was already dialing 911. Finn wiped blood from his lip. He looked at my father. Dad, please. My father walked over and punched him square in the jaw. Finn hit the floor. That's for my granddaughter. 10 minutes later, the police walked in and handcuffed him. At the family reunion, my grandmother stood up and said, "Before I die, one of you needs to confess. You know who you are." The backyard went completely silent. 43 family members frozen mid-bite with forks hovering over paper plates of potato salad and barbecue. My grandmother was 89 years old and had been talking about her death for the past decade, but she'd never done anything like this before. She stood at the head of the longest picnic table, her hand gripping my cousin's shoulder for support. Her eyes scanned the crowd, slowly landing on each face for just a moment before moving on. "I'm not playing games," she continued. "I know what happened. I've known for 7 years, and I've decided I'm not taking this secret to my grave." My mother leaned over and whispered, "What is she talking about?" But I had no idea. Nobody seemed to have any idea, except someone clearly did because I noticed my Uncle DeWitt's face had gone completely white. "In 2018, someone stole $60,000 from me," my grandmother announced. "They forged my signature and drained my savings account over the course of 3 months. When I reported it to the bank, they said there was nothing they could do because the withdrawals appeared legitimate." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My grandmother had always lived modestly. We assumed she had enough to get by, but none of us knew she'd had $60,000 in savings, or that someone had stolen it. "I hired a private investigator," she continued. "Took him 2 years, but he figured it out. I've been sitting on this information ever since, trying to decide what to do." Her eyes landed on my Uncle DeWitt and stayed there. "You have exactly 1 minute to confess, or I'm reading his report out loud to everyone here." DeWitt stood up so fast he knocked over his drink. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never steal from you." 50 seconds. "This is insane. You're senile. You're making things up." My aunt grabbed DeWitt's arm, trying to calm him down, but he shook her off. His face was red and sweating. Everyone was staring at him now. 30 seconds. "Fine," DeWitt shouted. "Fine. Yes, I took the money, but I was going to pay it back. I had gambling debts, and they were going to hurt my family if I didn't pay." The confession hung in the air like smoke. My grandmother slowly sat back down in her chair. She didn't look angry. She looked sad, exhausted. "I spent 2 years wondering if I was losing my mind," she said quietly. "Wondering if I'd somehow spent that money and forgotten about it. Do you know what that does to an old woman? Questioning her own sanity?" DeWitt started crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was desperate. You let me think I was going crazy instead of telling me the truth." My grandmother's voice cracked. "You watched me sell my car because I thought I couldn't afford the payments anymore. You watched me cancel my trip to see your father's grave in Kentucky because I thought I was broke." The rest of the family sat in stunned silence. Some people were crying. Some looked furious. My mother had her hand over her mouth. "I don't want your apology," my grandmother finally said. "I want my money back. Every single penny. You have 6 months to figure it out or I'm pressing charges. I don't care if you're my son. I'll do it." DeWitt nodded frantically. "I'll get it. I swear. I've been doing better. I stopped gambling 2 years ago." "You stopped gambling because you ran out of people to steal from." The reunion ended an hour later. Nobody felt much like celebrating anymore. DeWitt left first with his head down and his wife trailing behind him looking shell-shocked. She clearly hadn't known either. My grandmother asked me to drive her home. In the car, she stared out the window for a long time before speaking. "I've been waiting 7 years to do that. 7 years of family dinners and holidays watching him smile and hug me like nothing happened. Why didn't you confront him sooner?" She turned to look at me. "Because I wanted to do it in front of everyone. I wanted them all to know what kind of man he really is." "Is that petty?" I thought about it. "No, I think that's justice." She smiled slightly. "Good, because I don't regret it one bit." DeWitt paid her back in 4 months, sold his boat and his vacation timeshare. My grandmother used the money to finally take that trip to Kentucky. She passed away 8 months later peacefully in her sleep. At her funeral, DeWitt tried to give a eulogy, but halfway through he broke down and admitted what he'd done to everyone who hadn't been at the reunion. It was the most honest thing he'd ever done. My grandmother would have appreciated that. The woman at the morgue pulled back the sheet and asked me to confirm the identity. It was my face, but I was standing right there. I stumbled backward and grabbed the wall while the medical examiner looked at me with concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I couldn't answer. The woman on the table had my exact face, my nose, my freckles, the small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident. She was wearing a dress I owned, a necklace my grandmother gave me. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "Do you know this person?" the examiner asked. "She looks exactly like me. How is this possible?" The examiner checked her notes. "The body was found 3 days ago in a hotel room. Apparent overdose. No identification on her. Someone called in an anonymous tip that she might be you." Someone had called in a tip? Someone knew about this woman who looked identical to me? I thought about my life over the past few months. Strange things I had brushed off as coincidence. My credit card declined, even though I had money. A coworker mentioned seeing me at a restaurant across town when I was homesick. My neighbor asked about my trip to the coast when I hadn't gone anywhere. Someone had been living as me. The detective assigned was a tired man named Whitmore. "We've never seen anything like this," he admitted. "The resemblance is uncanny. We're running DNA tests." The DNA results showed this woman was not related to me at all. No twins separated at birth, just a stranger who looked exactly like me. But the investigation revealed something darker. This woman had been using my identity for 2 years. She had opened credit cards in my name, rented apartments in my name, started a job using my social security number. She had been living a parallel life as me in a city 3 hours away. "How did I not know?" I asked. "She was careful, used your maiden name, stayed off social media. If she hadn't died, you might never have found out." The anonymous tip came from a burner phone. Someone wanted her found. Someone wanted me to know. Whitmore discovered she hadn't acted it alone. There was a man named Arlo who helped her assume my identity and coached her on becoming me. He had studied my social media, my records, my family history. He had taught her my mannerisms. They had been running this con together for years. Arlo had a record for identity theft spanning decades. He found women who resembled his targets and transformed them into copies. Once they had extracted enough money, he would eliminate them and move on. The overdose wasn't accidental. Arlo killed her because she was becoming a liability. She had started feeling guilty and wanted to come clean to me. He couldn't let that happen. Police found Arlo 2 weeks later trying to board a flight out of the country. She had been homeless when Arlo found her and offered her a way out. He had promised money and stability in exchange for becoming someone else. By the time she realized what she had gotten into, it was too late. Arlo got 40 years for murder and fraud. I testified and watched him show zero remorse. He saw people as opportunities to exploit. Della was buried in a small cemetery with a headstone bearing her real name. I visit sometimes. It feels strange mourning someone who stole my identity, but she was a victim too. Just another woman Arlo used and discarded. The police helped me repair my credit and clear the fraudulent accounts. It took months, but eventually my life was my own again. The detective told me I was lucky. If Della hadn't died, Arlo might have targeted me directly. I was next on his list. I sleep with my doors double locked now. I check my credit report weekly. Arlo is in prison, but the paranoia lives rent-free in my mind. Some things you never fully recover from. You learn to live alongside the scars. I went to therapy for 6 months after everything happened. The therapist said it was normal to feel violated, even though nothing physical had happened. Someone had stolen my entire existence and worn it like a costume. That kind of invasion doesn't heal quickly. I changed everything about my digital life. New passwords, new security questions. I froze my credit and set up alerts for any new accounts opened in my name. I became obsessed with protecting myself from something that had already happened. My friends say I'm paranoid now. Maybe I am, but I know something most people don't. There are predators who study us through our social media posts. They find people to become us, and then they drain all we own. Gamer bros harassed me at a tournament. They didn't know I was their reigning champ. I'd been competing under the gamertag Void Killer for 3 years. Nobody knew the faceless champion who'd won 5 major tournaments was actually a 19-year-old girl named Ashley. The second I walked into the tournament hall, a group of guys at the registration table started laughing. The tallest one, wearing a jersey with Calvin on the back, asked if I was lost because the anime convention was next door. His friend Otto asked if my boyfriend was competing and offered to show me where the girlfriend section was. When I said I was registering to compete, Calvin spit out his energy drink. She thinks she can hang with real players because she beat her little brother at Mario Kart once. Otto grabbed my registration form and read it in a high-pitched voice. Kevin said I probably used a controller with pink buttons. Calvin grabbed my wrist and forced my hand into position, explaining that real gamers used claw grip. He pressed down until my knuckles cracked. Otto dumped out my equipment, holding up my custom mouse and laughing that it was probably programmed with macros because girls always needed to cheat. When I answered their quiz questions perfectly, Otto accused me of Googling and demanded my phone. Kevin went through my photos, making comments about OnlyFans. Calvin noticed my competitor badge and his face went red. He held it up and screamed that diversity quotas were destroying competitive gaming. He cornered me against the registration table and put his hand over my mouth when I tried to speak. His hand pressed so hard I tasted blood. Kevin grabbed my mouse and stepped on the cable until it sparked. Calvin leaned in and whispered, "After I'm done with you, I'm going to find every girl at this tournament and tell them exactly what happens when they try to invade male spaces." The tournament organizer called our pool to the main stage. My hands were trembling so badly I shoved them in my pockets. 3 years of dominating online, and these guys had made me feel like that scared 12-year-old who first got told she didn't belong in voice chat. I sat down at my assigned computer. The screen loaded my account. Void Killer. Calvin was 2 seats away. I watched him glance at my screen, then freeze. He looked at my face, back at the screen. His jaw dropped. "No way," he whispered. The commentators' voices boomed through the speakers. "And we have a special treat today, folks. 5-time champion Void Killer is competing in person for the first time ever." The crowd erupted. People were standing, trying to see who was sitting at my station. Calvin's face drained of color. Otto and Kevin were frantically whispering to each other. The first match started. Calvin versus me. He was shaking so badly he could barely click. I destroyed him in 4 minutes. The shortest match in tournament history for that bracket. The crowd went insane. Otto lasted 6 minutes. Kevin lasted 5. After each match, I stood up and looked them directly in the eyes. Said nothing. Just let them sit with it. By the finals, the story had spread through the entire hall. People had footage of Calvin's crew harassing me at registration. Someone had recorded Kevin destroying my mouse. Another person caught Calvin covering my mouth. The tournament organizers pulled all 3 aside during the semifinal break. When they came back, their faces were gray. I won the tournament. 6th championship. When I lifted the trophy, the crowd chanted Void Killer so loud the walls shook. The post-match interview went viral. The host asked about competing in person for the first time. I told the truth, every detail about what Calvin and his friends had done. The footage was everywhere within hours. Gaming news sites picked it up, then mainstream outlets. Calvin's team dropped him before the sunset. Otto lost his streaming partnership. Kevin's sponsorship deals evaporated overnight. 3 weeks later, the tournament organization announced a permanent ban on all 3. Lifetime. No appeals. Calvin tried to apologize publicly, posted a video saying he'd made mistakes and was working on himself. The comments were disabled within an hour. I got messages from hundreds of girls after that. Girls who'd quit competitive gaming because of guys like Calvin. Girls who'd never entered tournaments because they were afraid of exactly what happened to me. I started a mentorship program, paired experienced female players with newcomers, gave them someone to sit with at LANs, someone who'd already faced the Calvins of the world, and won. Last month, one of my mentees won her first regional tournament. She's 15. Her gamer tag is Ashley's Mouse because she uses the same model I do. After her victory, a guy in the crowd yelled that she probably cheated. She grabbed the microphone and said, "My mentor is Void Killer. You want to say that again?" The room went silent. Then the crowd started laughing at him. That's the thing about spaces people say you don't belong in. You don't just take them. You hold them open for everyone who comes after you. Calvin streams to about 40 viewers now, mostly bots. Sometimes I check in just to watch his numbers. Petty? Maybe, but I earned it. Full story linked below. I found a notification on my husband's phone that said, "Your storage unit payment is overdue." We don't have a storage unit. My husband Theo was in the shower and his phone was charging on the nightstand when I saw it light up. I was not the type to snoop, but something about that notification made my skin prickle. We had been married for 9 years and shared everything including our finances. There was no storage unit on any of our statements. I memorized the name of the facility before the screen went dark. When Theo came out of the bathroom, I asked him casually if we had any storage units I had forgotten about. He laughed and said no and asked why. I told him I was thinking about renting one for my craft supplies, and he said that was a great idea before kissing my forehead and leaving for work. He lied to my face without blinking. The next morning, I drove to the storage storage facility with the spare key I found hidden in his toolbox. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get it into the lock. I expected to find evidence of an affair or gambling debt or some secret life I never knew about. What I found was so much worse. The unit was filled with boxes labeled with dates going back 15 years, before we even met. I opened the first box and found newspaper clippings about missing women from 3 different states. My vision started tunneling as I opened another box. There were pieces of jewelry and driver's licenses and photographs of women I did not recognize. Some of the photos looked like they were taken without the women knowing. Others looked like crime scene photos taken by whoever committed the crime. I stumbled backward and knocked over a box near the door. Out spilled dozens of burner phones and zip ties and rolls of duct tape. There was a hunting knife with something dried on the blade that I did not want to identify. I ran outside and vomited in the parking lot. My husband of 9 years was a monster. I had slept next to him for almost a decade without knowing. I called the police from a gas station 3 miles away because I was terrified he could somehow track my location. The detective who arrived looked skeptical at first, like he thought I was a paranoid wife making up stories. Then I showed him the photos I took inside the unit. His face went gray and he immediately called for backup. They arrested Theo at his office that afternoon. I watched from across the street as they led him out in handcuffs. He looked confused at first. Then he saw me standing there and his expression changed completely. The mask he had worn for 9 years slipped, and I saw something cold and empty behind his eyes. He smiled at me, not a nervous smile or a pleading smile, a smile that said he knew exactly what I had found, and he was not sorry. The investigation revealed that Theo had been linked to 7 missing women over 20 years. 5 bodies were eventually recovered using information from the storage unit. 2 women were still missing and probably always would be. I had to testify at his trial about finding the unit and everything I saw inside. His defense attorney tried to suggest I planted evidence because I wanted a divorce. The jury did not believe him. Theo was convicted on 5 counts and sentenced to life without parole. Reporters camped outside my house for weeks asking how I could not have known. The truth was I had known something was wrong for years, but I convinced myself I was imagining things. The way he would disappear for entire weekends with excuses that never quite made sense. The scratches on his arms he blamed on yard work. The distant look in his eyes sometimes when he thought I was not watching. I ignored every warning sign because I loved him, and I did not want my marriage to be a lie. It took me 2 years of therapy to stop blaming myself. My therapist said predators are experts at hiding and that I was a victim too. Some days I believe her. Other days I lie awake wondering if I could have saved even one of those women if I had been paying closer attention. I moved across the country and changed my last name. I do not date anymore. I cannot trust my own judgment after being so wrong about the person who shared my bed for 9 years. Sometimes I still see his face smiling at me from across that parking lot. That smile haunts me more than anything else. He wanted me to know what he was capable of. He wanted me to be afraid. I am. My daughter said I'm the reason her dad left, so I left her too. I was making coffee after a double shift when my 14-year-old Ariana walked into the kitchen dressed for a party I'd never approved. I'm going to Mia's house. Her mom said I could sleep over. It's a school night. You have a test tomorrow. Her face twisted into something I barely recognized. Mia's mom trusts her. You're so controlling. No wonder dad couldn't stand living here. I set down my coffee. Ariana, it's true. She stepped closer, tears building in her eyes. You drove him away. Everyone knows it. I heard Mia's mom say it. You're impossible to live with. I should have stayed calm. I should have explained. Instead, I was exhausted and hurt, and I said the worst thing I could have said. Fine. You want me gone? I'll give you some space. I grabbed my keys and drove to my sister's house. I told myself I'd go back in the morning, that I just needed one night to clear my head. But Ariana didn't call, didn't text, nothing. So I waited. She didn't know what I'd protected her from. The savings account her father emptied before he left. The nights I'd worked double shifts to keep us in our house. The truth about why he really disappeared, which had nothing to do with me being impossible, and everything to do with him finding someone younger in another state. I'd let her believe a softer story, that her dad just needed space, that sometimes people grow apart. I thought I was protecting her. Maybe I was just protecting myself from having that conversation. By day 3, her Instagram told the whole story. Photos at parties, comments about how free she felt. A boy I didn't recognize with his arm around her shoulder. By day 5, the texts started. Where's the permission slip for the field trip? Do we have laundry detergent? The school called about my test. Can you call them back? I responded to each one the same way. You can handle it. Day 7 broke her. She called me crying at 11 p.m. The party she'd gone to had gotten out of control. Some older kids showed up. Things got scary. She'd locked herself in a bathroom. Mom, please come get me. I'm sorry, please. Every instinct told me to run to my car, but I made myself ask the question. Did you try calling your dad? Silence. Then quietly, I found his number online. He has a new family now. A little boy. He posted photos from Disneyland last week. She'd never told me she'd looked him up. Did you call him? He didn't answer. I texted and he just said, her voice cracked. He said I should ask my mother, that he signed away his rights for a reason. I was already grabbing my keys. I found her sitting on the curb outside a house I didn't recognize. Mascara streaked down her face. She climbed into the car without saying anything. We drove home in silence. When we got inside, she sat at the kitchen table and stared at her hands. I didn't know he signed away his rights. I never told you. Why? I sat down across from her. Because you were 10. Because I wanted you to believe your father loved you even if he couldn't show it. Because I thought the truth would hurt more than the lie. She looked up at me. You let me blame you. For years. You let me think you were the problem. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From knowing my dad didn't want me? She started crying again. I already knew, Mom. I just didn't want to believe it. It was easier to be mad at you. I reached across the table and took her hands. I'm sorry I left this week. That wasn't fair. I was hurt and I handled it wrong. I'm sorry I said you were the reason he left. She squeezed my fingers. You're not. You're the reason I'm okay. You're the reason we still have a house and I have clothes and someone shows up to my volleyball games. I'll always show up. I know. She wiped her eyes. I think I always knew. I just didn't want to admit that the parent who stayed was the one who actually loved me. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just holding hands across the table. She's 16 now, still pushes boundaries, still rolls her eyes when I enforce curfew. We fight about clothes and boys and screen time like every other mother and daughter, but she's never blamed me for her father again. And whenever she leaves the house, no matter how annoyed she is with me, she always says the same thing. Love you, Mom. 3 words. That's all I ever needed. Not an apology, not perfection, just the knowledge that when she walks out the door, she knows exactly who will be there when she comes back. Her dad gave her life, but I gave her a home, and she finally understands the difference. Full story linked below. My husband planned a date night for the first time in 3 years. The restaurant was the same one where I met my ex. The table was the same. He knew. When Terrence handed me the reservation card, my blood ran cold. Bellini's, table 14 by by the window, the exact spot where I met Julian 8 years ago. I told myself it was coincidence, but when the hostess led us to that specific table with the fountain view, where Julian first told me he loved me, I knew something was wrong. Terrence pulled out my chair. He never did that. I wanted tonight to be special, he said, watching my face. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled holding the menu. How could he know about this restaurant? I never mentioned Julian. I buried that relationship so deep I forgot it existed. Julian was my first love. We dated 2 years until I caught him with my roommate in my own bed. The betrayal shattered me. When I met Terrence a year later, I decided never to tell him. The wound was too fresh, then too much time passed, then it became a secret kept too long to reveal. You seem distracted, Terrence said, touching my hand. Everything okay? Fine, just tired from work. The waiter took our orders. Terrence ordered lamb, my least favorite dish. He knew I hated lamb. Always ordered chicken because the smell made me sick. Something was happening. After the waiter left, Terrence leaned back. I've been thinking lately about us, about whether there are things we haven't told each other. My stomach dropped. Everyone has a past, Terrence. True, but not everyone's past walks into their present. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a photo of me and Julian at this exact table, his arm around me, both laughing. Timestamp said 8 years ago. Where did you get this? I whispered. Julian sent it 3 months ago. Found me on social media. Wanted to reconnect with you and thought I should know your history first. 3 months. He knew for 3 months and said nothing. He told me everything. Terrence continued. How you met here. How you dated for years. How you almost married him. He leaned forward. He also said you've been texting him for 6 months. That you're planning to leave me. The room started spinning. That's not true. I haven't spoken to Julian since we broke up. He showed me screenshots. They're fake. Terrence, I swear, I have not contacted Julian. I don't even have his number. Terrence studied my face, then pulled out a second phone I'd never seen. This was hidden in your underwear drawer. Found it last week. I stared in confusion. That's not mine. It has your fingerprint registered. Texts to Julian going back 6 months. Photos you sent him. He opened the gallery. Photos of me sleeping. Photos of me in the shower. Photos taken from angles suggesting someone else held the camera. Someone inside our house. I have never seen that phone, I said, voice shaking. Someone put it there. Someone is setting me up. Who would do that? Maybe Julian. He was always obsessive. Terrence went quiet, then said something that froze my blood. Julian died 4 years ago. Car accident. I verified it with public records after he first contacted me. Whoever's been messaging me isn't Julian. We stared at each other as realization hit. Someone had been in our house, planted a phone, taken photos of me without my knowledge, pretending to be my dead ex-boyfriend, knowing details about my past I never told anyone. Terrence grabbed my hand. We need to leave. Now. As we stood, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Enjoying dinner? I'm enjoying mine. Table 7. We turned to look. Table 7 was empty, but on the tablecloth sat a single photograph. Terrence walked over and picked it up. His face went pale. It was us, taken moments ago, sitting at our table, from inside the restaurant. Someone watched us the entire time. Run, Terrence said. We burst through the doors and sprinted to the car. He fumbled with keys while I watched the entrance. No one followed. We drove home in terrified silence. When we pulled into our driveway, I grabbed his arm hard. Every light in our house was on. We had left them off. My phone buzzed again. Welcome home. I've been waiting so long for this moment. Terrence called 911 with shaking hands. I stared at our glowing windows. Then I saw it, a silhouette in our bedroom window. Someone standing perfectly still, watching us in the driveway. The figure raised one hand and waved slowly. Our front door swung open on its own, and from somewhere inside our house, a phone started ringing with Julian's old ringtone. The one only he and I knew. The one I deleted 8 years ago. My mom checked my browser history to catch me doing something bad. She caught my dad instead. My grades slipped last semester. 1B+. That's it. 1B+ in AP history. And my mom decided I was clearly distracted by something. She launched a full investigation, checked my phone, checked my socials, found nothing because I'm boring. So she moved to the family computer. Saturday morning, I'm minding my business, eating waffles, thinking about nothing. Mom walks in with the family laptop like she's carrying evidence in a murder trial. We need to talk. That voice. The I found something and you're about to be in trouble voice. I sat down ready to defend whatever she thought I did. My dad looked up from his coffee. She set the laptop on the table and opened it. Someone in this house has been searching things they shouldn't be searching. She looked directly at me. Of course she did. I'm 16. I'm automatically the suspect for everything. It wasn't me. Then explain this. She turned the screen toward me. I saw the search history. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Mom, that's not me. Then who is it? I pointed at my dad. His face went white, like actually white, like he'd seen a ghost. Except the ghost was his own browser history coming back to haunt him. Mom spun the laptop toward Dad. Care to explain? Dad didn't move. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you've been searching what is Riz's and how to use Riz correctly. And why did the kid at Target call me a gooner? I spit out my waffle. Dad put his head in his hands. I was just trying to understand what you kids are talking about. Mom kept scrolling. What does no cap mean? What is skibidi toilet? Why do kids say Sigma now? She looked up at him. David, what is this? I just wanted to connect with her. He pointed at me. She never talks to me anymore. I thought if I learned the language I could. Dad, I stopped him. Did you Google what is gooning? He didn't answer, which was an answer. What even came up? I asked. Things I can never unsee. Mom kept scrolling. Then she stopped. Her face changed. What's this? She turned the screen. I saw it before she read it out loud. How to last longer in. Okay. Dad lunged for the laptop. That one's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, David. I covered my ears. I'm still here. I'm still in the room. I'm still eating waffles. Mom closed the laptop, looked at Dad, looked at me. For the first time in my life, my mom and I were on the same team, united in secondhand embarrassment and maybe a little trauma. The kitchen went quiet. Dad was staring at the table like it owed him money. Mom was staring at Dad like he owed her an explanation. I was staring at my waffles, wishing they could teleport. David. Mom's voice was calm now. Scary calm. Is there anything else on this laptop I should know about? No. You sure? I'm sure. She opened it again. Dad flinched. She scrolled for what felt like an hour. Then she laughed. Not a mean laugh. A real one. You searched how to make wife laugh again. Dad's shoulders dropped. That was from last month, after the fight about the thermostat. We didn't have a fight about the thermostat. You gave me the silent treatment for 2 days. Because you set it to 62 degrees in December, David. That's not a fight. That's a war crime. I snorted. Dad looked at me. You think that's funny? I think all of this is funny. Mom closed the laptop again, looked at me. So, about that B+. Mom, seriously? Your father's midlife crisis doesn't erase your grades. Dad held up a finger. I'd like to point out that I'm not having a midlife crisis. I'm just trying to connect with my daughter, and also maybe some other things we don't need to discuss. Mom stared at him. We're absolutely discussing it. Tonight, after she goes to bed. I didn't want to know what that meant. I finished my waffles and excused myself. The B+ never got brought up again. I think Mom forgot. Or maybe she decided Dad's public humiliation was enough family drama for one semester. Either way, I'll take it. Dad's been different since that morning. He still tries to connect with me, but now he just asks what words mean instead of Googling them. Last week he asked me what slay meant, and I told him. He said, "You slay, kiddo," at dinner, and I almost threw up. But also, it was kind of sweet. Mom taught him about incognito mode. Finally, he acted like she'd handed him the keys to the universe. "This changes everything," he said. "It changes nothing," Mom replied. "I'll always know." She winked at me. I don't think Dad searched anything embarrassing since. At least not on the family laptop. Some mysteries are better left unsolved.
My mom handed me a letter and said, "Your father wrote this the night before he died. He made me promise to wait until you turned 30. I turned 30 yesterday. The envelope was yellowed and sealed with tape that had turned brown over 18 years. My dad died when I was 12. Heart attack in his office. That's what everyone told me. I found him when I came home from school. For 18 years, I'd carried the guilt of our last conversation being a stupid argument about a sleepover. My mom's hands were shaking as she held the envelope out. I almost burned it so many times," she whispered through tears, "but I promised him." I opened it carefully, terrified the paper might fall apart. His handwriting was messier than I remembered, rushed and desperate. "Son, if you're reading this, everything went wrong, and I couldn't fix it in time. You need to know the truth about who I was and why I had to leave you." I looked at my mom. She was crying silently. "Keep reading," she said. The letter explained that my father hadn't died of a heart attack. He'd been murdered. He worked for an insurance company, but really, he'd been investigating massive fraud within the organization. He'd discovered that executives were systematically denying claims to terminally ill patients, then pocketing the money meant for treatments. Millions stolen over years. Dozens of people died because their coverage was secretly canceled while they fought for their lives. My father gathered evidence and was planning to go to the FBI the morning after he wrote that letter. "They found out," he wrote. "I don't know how, but they know what I have. I've hidden copies of everything somewhere only you would think to look. Remember where we buried the time capsule when you were 9? Dig 3 feet north of that spot. I'm so sorry I won't watch you grow up, but you're the only person I trust to finish what I started." I drove to our old house that night. The family there thought I was insane, but I explained my father died when I was young and left something buried. They let me dig in their backyard at midnight while their kids watched from the window. 3 feet north of where the time capsule had been, my shovel hit something hard. I found a waterproof container. Inside were documents, audio recordings, photographs, everything my father collected over 2 years of investigation. Names of executives with signatures on denial letters, bank account numbers showing where the money went, a list of 17 people who died because of what these men did. The company still existed and had actually grown larger since my father's death. Some of the same executives were still there, older now, wealthier, probably believing they'd gotten away with everything. I contacted a journalist friend who specialized in corporate investigations. It took 8 months of careful work, but we built an airtight case using my father's evidence as the foundation, then added documentation showing the fraud had continued for 2 decades. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. 3 executives were arrested by noon. The company's stock crashed 40% before markets closed. Families of victims filed lawsuits totaling over $200 million. One executive tried to flee and was caught at the airport with 3 fake passports. At the trial, I sat in the front row every day for 11 weeks. When the lead executive was convicted on all counts, he looked directly at me with hatred. "Your father should have minded his own business." I stared back. "My father saved more lives dead than you ever saved alive." That night, I visited his grave for the first time in years. I put copies of all 3 guilty verdicts on the headstone and sat there until sunrise. "I finished it, Dad. Took 18 years, but I finished it." My mom joined me later that morning. She brought coffee and we sat together in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "He knew they would kill him. He wrote that letter because he knew he wasn't going to survive, but he also knew you would eventually find the truth and finish what he started." I asked why she waited until I was 30. "Because he wanted you to have a normal childhood first. He wanted you to grow up without that burden, and he wanted you to be old enough and strong enough to handle what would come next." She squeezed my hand. "He would be so proud of you."
My mother slept with my fiancé and came back crawling with a ridiculous request. My mother pulled me aside during the rehearsal dinner and said, "I slept with Robbie last week." Robbie was my fiancé of 4 years. I thought she was making some sick joke until I saw the guilt in her eyes. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to. She actually reached for my hand like we were going to bond over this. I found Robbie outside smoking with his groomsmen. He didn't even deny it, just shrugged and said my mom had come on to him and he was weak. Like sleeping with your future mother-in-law was equivalent to eating an extra slice of cake. I called off the wedding that night, sent a mass text to all guests that it was canceled, moved out of our apartment the next day, blocked them both on everything. Within 6 months, I was regional manager making twice what Robbie made. I bought a townhouse and adopted 2 rescue cats, started therapy and joined a hiking group where I met actual friends. My therapist helped me realize my mother had been competing with me my whole life, wearing inappropriate outfits to my graduations, flirting with my high school boyfriends. This was just her biggest betrayal yet. 8 months after the canceled wedding, my mother showed up at my office, not to apologize. She was crying and asking for help. "I need you to talk to Robbie for me. He won't return my calls." The audacity made me laugh out loud, but she wasn't done. She explained they'd been seeing each other since the wedding was canceled, that they were in love, that age was just a number. "I need you to be my maid of honor." She said it completely straight-faced. "You're marrying my ex-fiancé? We're soulmates. And you still have all those vendor contacts. The venue might give us the same date since you canceled so last minute." She wanted my wedding venue, my vendors, my plans. She'd already told family I was supportive, posted on Facebook about how mature I was being, even used my engagement photo locations, just cropping me out and inserting herself. She pulled out her phone to show me. "Look, I'm wearing your grandmother's ring. Robbie said you'd want me to have it. The ring my dying grandmother had given me specifically. Now on my mother's finger." I stayed calm, told her I needed time to process. For 2 weeks, she bombarded me with messages about dress shopping and cake tasting. She sent links to mother of the bride dresses asking if they were too young for her. I met with my friend who was a party planner. We spent hours crafting the perfect response. I reached out to family members and learned she'd been lying extensively. Told them I'd begged her to take Robbie off my hands. My aunt revealed that mom had been pursuing Robbie throughout our entire relationship, showing up at his gym, texting him constantly. The seduction had been years in the making. We met at a restaurant where she immediately immediately started talking about centerpieces. I let her ramble for 5 minutes. Then I slid my phone across the table showing a Facebook post I just published. It detailed exactly what happened, how she'd slept with my fiance, how she was trying to use my wedding plans, how she'd lied to everyone. Take that down immediately, she grabbed for my phone. How could you do this to me? The same way you did it to me, publicly and without remorse. She started crying about her reputation, how Robbie would leave her if there was drama. I stood up to leave. She grabbed my wrist. Wait, there's something else. I'm pregnant. Robbie doesn't know yet, please. I looked at her hand on my wrist, the same hand wearing my grandmother's ring. That's not my problem. I walked out. The Facebook post went viral in our family. Aunts and uncles who'd believed her lies started calling to apologize. My grandmother's sister threatened to sue for the ring. Robbie's parents found out the full story and were horrified. 3 weeks later, my mother announced the pregnancy publicly, trying to salvage her image. Robbie proposed properly this time, probably out of obligation. But here's what she didn't expect. Robbie's ex-girlfriend from college reached out to me after seeing my post. She told me my mother wasn't the first older woman Robbie had been with. His pattern was targeting women who could advance his career or lifestyle. My mother had money. I had potential. We were both marks. I forwarded everything to my mother anonymously. She didn't believe it at first. Then she started watching, noticing how Robbie's eyes wandered, how he'd disappear for hours, how he seemed more interested in her credit cards than her company. She called me 6 months pregnant, crying. You were right. He's been cheating with someone from his office. She's 23. I listened. I didn't comfort her. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and pregnant and everyone hates me. You made your choices. Now you live with them. I hung up. My mother had the baby, a girl. Robbie signed away his rights and moved to another state with the 23-year-old. Sometimes I see photos of my half-sister on social media. She looks like me when I was little. Same eyes, same smile. I don't reach out. Maybe one day when she's older and can understand, I'll tell her the truth. But that's not my responsibility right now. I'm engaged again to a man I met in my hiking group, someone who's never met my mother and never will. At our wedding, the maid of honor will be my best friend Claire. The mother of the bride seat will be empty, and I'll finally have the day I deserved all along. Full story linked below.
My parents asked me to be the bigger person and give my baby to my brother. My brother Fielding and his wife had been trying to get pregnant for 5 years with no success. When my wife and I announced we were expecting, Fielding pulled me aside at the party and said, that should have been us. I told him I was sorry he was struggling and he just stared at me with empty eyes. I thought he was grieving. I had no idea what he was actually planning. Fielding started calling the baby our family's miracle every time he saw us. He showed up uninvited to my wife's ultrasound appointment and tried to come into the room with us. When I told him that was inappropriate, he looked at me like I'd slapped him and said, I just want to see our baby. I told my parents, and my mom said he was just excited to be an uncle, and I needed to stop being so selfish. A few weeks later, my wife came home shaking because she ran into one of Fielding's co-workers at the grocery store. The co-worker congratulated her and said Fielding had been telling everyone at his office that he was expecting a baby soon. My mom said he probably just misspoke and we were making a big deal out of nothing. At a family dinner, Fielding sat next to my wife even though there were other open seats. He kept reaching over and touching her belly without asking. At one point, he leaned in and whispered, I can't wait to bring you home, and my wife jerked away from him. I told my parents we needed to talk about Fielding's behavior, and my dad said, he's been through so much. Can't you just let him have this? I didn't know what that meant until my wife found the texts. She was looking for a photo Fielding had sent months ago and scrolled too far. There were messages between Fielding and his wife that made her blood run cold. They don't deserve this baby. We've been waiting longer. We've been trying longer. It's almost time. And then one from the night we announced the pregnancy. God finally answered our prayers. He just delivered it to the wrong address. My parents called a family meeting 2 months before the due date. We walked in, and Fielding was already sitting on the couch with tears streaming down his face. My parents were on either side of him like bodyguards. My mom took a deep breath and said, we need to discuss the baby's future. I asked what that meant. My dad said, Fielding and his wife have been trying for 5 years. You got pregnant on your first try. That's not fair. I waited for him to laugh. He didn't. My mom said, we're asking you to be the bigger person here. Let Fielding and his wife raise the baby. You're young. You can have more. My wife grabbed my arm so hard her nails broke the skin. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots of Fielding's texts. My mom barely looked. She said, he's just hurting. You don't understand what infertility does to a person. Fielding stood up and his tears dried up like someone flipped a switch. He said, I have been waiting for 5 years. 5 years of needles and doctors and failure. You got drunk one night and got everything I ever wanted. I said that didn't entitle him to my child. He stepped closer and said, I've already set up the nursery. I painted it yellow because we don't know the gender yet. I bought a crib and a changing table and a rocking chair that plays lullabies. That baby has a home waiting for her. My wife said we were leaving. Fielding grabbed her arm and said, you're not taking my baby anywhere. I shoved him off her and told my parents to look at what they created. My mom said, you're tearing this family apart over nothing. We walked out and I called a lawyer the next morning. We got a restraining order and told the hospital that nobody except my wife's mother was allowed in the delivery room or anywhere near us. My daughter was born on a Tuesday at 3 in the morning. I woke up a few hours later to a shadow moving in the dark room. Fielding was standing over the bassinet with his hands reaching down. I screamed and he spun around holding my daughter against his chest. He said, she's mine. She was always supposed to be mine. God just made a mistake and I'm fixing it. I tackled him and my wife caught the baby before she hit the ground. Fielding was on the floor sobbing and screaming, give her back. I've waited 5 years. I deserve her more than you. Security dragged him out while he kept screaming that he would have been a better father. The police arrested him in the hallway. My parents showed up 20 minutes later and my mom looked at me with pure hatred and said, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed your brother's life. My daughter just turned 1. Fielding took a plea deal for attempted kidnapping and my parents still think I should apologize for pressing charges.
My son asked me to check under his bed. He said, the man who looks like daddy is under there. My husband was standing next to me. My 4-year-old Bennett had been having nightmares for weeks. Every night around 2 in the morning, he would scream for us, crying about the man in his room. We assumed normal childhood fears, monsters under the bed, shadows that looked like faces. Kids imagine things at that age. But this was different. The man who looks like daddy, I asked, kneeling beside his bed. What do you mean, sweetheart? Bennett pointed at my husband in the doorway. Daddy is right there, but the other daddy is under my bed. He watches me sleep every single night. I looked at my husband. He shrugged, trying to seem casual, but I saw tension in his jaw. Buddy, there's no one under your bed, he said gently. It's just your imagination. No, Bennett said firmly. He comes when you leave. He looks just like you, but his eyes are wrong. They're too shiny and he never blinks. My skin prickled. I got on my hands and knees and looked under the bed. Nothing but dust and forgotten toys. I showed Bennett the empty space. He seemed relieved and we got him back to sleep, but I couldn't shake what he said. The man who looks like daddy. Over the following days, I started noticing things. Small things. My husband would leave for work at 7, but sometimes I saw his car parked down the street an hour later. He said he forgot something, but never came inside. He started showering twice daily. Changed his phone password after 12 years. One night I woke at 3 and found his side empty. I walked through the dark house and found him in the kitchen, standing in complete darkness, staring out the window at nothing. "What are you doing?" I asked. He turned around and for just a second, something looked different. His smile too wide, his eyes too still. Something off in a way I couldn't name. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Coming back to bed?" I nodded but didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just lay there studying his face for something I couldn't identify. Next morning I called my mother-in-law, asked if there was anything about the family I should know. Medical history, mental health issues, anything hereditary. She went quiet for a long time, then asked why I was calling. I told her about Bennett's nightmares, the man who looks like daddy, my husband's strange behavior. She started crying quietly. "I hoped this wouldn't happen," she whispered. "I prayed it would skip his generation." "What are you talking about? My husband had an identical twin brother. Nobody talked about him because he was institutionalized as a teenager. He was dangerous, violent, obsessed with taking over his brother's life. He believed he was the real one and my husband was the imposter." Ice crawled up my spine. "What happened to him?" "He escaped 15 years ago. They never found him. We assumed he died somewhere alone, but sometimes I wondered if he was still out there watching." She couldn't continue. I hung up and sat in silence. That night I waited until Bennett slept, set up my phone to record and hid it on his bookshelf, pointed at the bed. Didn't tell my husband. At 2 in the morning the recording caught something that stopped my heart. The closet door opened slowly and silently. A man crawled out on his hands and knees, wearing my husband's clothes, my husband's face, but his movements were wrong, too deliberate, too predatory. He crawled to Bennett's bed and watched my son sleep, face inches away, for 45 minutes, not moving, just watching with shiny, unblinking eyes. Then he crawled backward into the closet without a sound. I watched with shaking hands and called police immediately. They found him living in our attic. He had been there 2 months. Photographs of our family covered the walls. A journal documented our routines and schedules. He had written a detailed plan to replace his brother and take over his entire life. My husband never knew his father had an identical twin. His parents hid it completely, too ashamed to tell the truth. The man had been watching through vents, learning how to become my husband, waiting for the perfect moment to make the switch. Bennett was the only one who noticed. Kids see things adults explain away. When police took him into custody, he didn't resist, just looked at my husband with that too wide smile. "I would have been so much better at being you," he said calmly. We moved out the next week. Bennett sleeps with every light on now. So do I. Sometimes I still check closets before bed. Sometimes I study my husband's eyes, making sure they look right, making sure he's really him.
My son came home with a black eye. He said, "The man said if I told you, he'd hurt mom next." I dropped to my knees right there in the doorway and held his small face in my trembling hands. His left eye was completely swollen shut, with deep purple and black bruising spreading all across his cheekbone and down toward his jaw. He was only 7 years old, and someone had done this to him. I asked him what man did this, and he immediately started sobbing hysterically. He said through his tears that he could not tell me anything, or the man would somehow know about it. He said the man watches everything we do and hears everything we say. My wife came running from the kitchen when she heard our son crying so hard. She let out a horrified scream when she saw the condition of his battered face and immediately scooped him up into her arms. She started firing questions at him, asking what happened and who did this and where it happened, but he just kept repeating the same terrifying phrase over and over again. If he told us anything at all, the man would come back and hurt mommy next. I told my wife to take him inside and get some ice on his face while I went outside to check the entire yard and perimeter of our property for any signs of trouble. I walked every single inch of our fence line and checked behind every bush and tree looking for anything unusual or out of place. Nothing seemed wrong at all. I went back inside and pulled up the security camera footage we had installed last year after a string of break-ins hit our neighborhood. I started scrolling back through the footage from earlier that afternoon and watched my son walking home alone from the school bus stop about 3 blocks away from our house. Everything looked completely normal at first. Then a dark-colored sedan pulled up slowly right beside him on the sidewalk. The car stopped and someone inside rolled down the passenger window and started talking to my son through the open window. I watched in absolute horror as my 7-year-old boy then opened the car door and climbed inside with this complete stranger. The car drove away with my child inside, and my heart nearly stopped beating right there in my chest. The footage showed the dark sedan returning to our street roughly 20 minutes later. My son climbed out of the passenger side looking absolutely terrified and shaking. He ran toward our house without looking back while the car sped away before I could make out any details about the license plate number. I called the police immediately with my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the numbers correctly. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes and took statements from all 3 of us. They reviewed the security footage carefully, but the camera angle was just wrong enough that we could not see the driver's face or the license plate numbers at all. All we could confirm was a dark 4-door sedan with heavily tinted windows. They tried asking my son gentle questions, but he absolutely refused to answer anything they asked. He just kept crying and saying the man would know if he talked. One of the officers called in a detective who arrived about an hour later. The detective pulled me aside into the garage away from my family and said this situation could potentially be very serious. He asked if anyone had recent grudges against our family for any reason at all. He asked if we owed money to anyone dangerous. He asked if my wife had any former boyfriends or co-workers who might want to cause her harm. I said no to every single question he asked because none of it made any sense to me. That night I sat up in the living room watching the security camera feeds on my laptop until the sun came up the next morning. Nothing suspicious happened all night long. No cars drove by slowly. No figures appeared in our yard. The next morning I drove my son to school personally, rather than letting him take the bus alone. I walked him all the way inside the building and spoke directly with his teacher and the principal about what had happened. They both promised to keep him within sight of an adult every single moment of the entire school day. I picked him up myself that afternoon right at dismissal. He seemed calmer and reported no new injuries or frightening encounters. I started hoping this nightmare was finally over. Then around 8 that evening, my wife's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message said, "Tell your husband to stop investigating or else." Attached was a photograph of my wife taken that very morning at the grocery store. The picture was clearly shot from inside a vehicle in the parking lot. She started hyperventilating so badly I thought she might pass pass out on the floor. I grabbed her phone and tried calling the number. No answer. I texted demanding to know who this was. No response ever came back. I called police again, and they traced the number to a prepaid burner phone purchased with cash. Complete dead end.
My son's teacher asked me to stay after pickup. She showed me a drawing he made. It was our house, with a person standing in every window. There are only 3 of us. He drew 7 people. I stared at the crayon drawing spread across the tiny desk, while my 6-year-old son Benji waited in the hallway with the teaching assistant. Completely unaware his artwork had sparked a parent-teacher emergency meeting, the house was unmistakably ours, right down to the red front door and the crooked mailbox my husband kept promising to fix every weekend. But in every single window stood a figure drawn in black crayon, 2 in the kitchen window, 1 in each of the 3 bedrooms, 1 in the bathroom, and 1 in the small attic window that we kept permanently locked because the previous owners had warned us the floor up there was unstable. Benji's been drawing variations of this exact picture for 2 weeks now, his teacher said quietly, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. I didn't want to alarm you at first because children draw strange things all the time, but today he told another student that the people in the windows watch him sleep every night. My blood ran cold and I felt my hands start trembling. He's always had an extremely active imagination, I said, but my voice came out shaky and unconvincing even to myself. Has anything changed at home recently? Any stress, trauma, or significant disruption in his routine? I shook my head slowly, but my mind was racing through possibilities. We'd moved into this house 4 months ago, an old Victorian that needed serious work but had beautiful bones and incredible potential. Great price for the neighborhood. Too great. I now realized looking back at how eager the sellers had been to close quickly. That night, I sat with Benji during dinner and tried to ask casual questions while keeping my voice light and curious. Tell me about your drawing today, buddy. The one with our house that you showed your teacher. He kept eating his chicken nuggets methodically like I hadn't spoken at all. Benji, can you tell mommy about the people in the windows? They don't like when I talk about them, he whispered without looking up from his plate. The tall one especially gets really mad when I say things. I felt every single hair on my arm stand straight up. My stomach twisted into knots. What tall one, sweetie? Can you describe him to me? The one who stands in your doorway at night watching. He watches you and daddy sleep for hours and hours. He has really long arms that hang down past his knees. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My husband walked in from work at that exact moment whistling some random tune, and I must have looked absolutely terrified because he immediately dropped his briefcase and asked what was wrong. I showed him the drawing after Benji went to bed at 8. He laughed it off nervously at first, said kids imagine crazy things all the time, probably just saw something scary on television or YouTube that we didn't know about. But I noticed he double-checked every single lock in the house before we went to bed that night, something he'd never done before. That night I couldn't sleep at all. I lay there rigid for hours, staring at our bedroom doorway through the darkness, thinking about long arms and someone watching us. Around 3 a.m. I heard footsteps directly above us, distinct, heavy, deliberate footsteps creaking across the attic floor. My husband heard them too because he shot up in bed instantly. He grabbed the aluminum baseball bat from the closet and crept upstairs while I dialed 911 with shaking fingers and whispered our address to the dispatcher. The police found evidence that someone had been living in our attic for weeks, possibly months. There was a filthy sleeping bag in the corner, piles of empty food wrappers and cracker boxes, dozens of water bottles filled with urine lined against the wall. A small hole had been carefully drilled through the attic floor, positioned directly above our bed, covered with a tiny piece of wood that could be silently slid aside for viewing. They found a second hole drilled directly above Benji's bedroom. He'd been watching all of us, every single night. The officers said he must have been entering through the attic window while we were at work and school during the day, using the massive old oak tree beside the house to climb up undetected. Hidden in the insulation, they found photographs. Hundreds and hundreds of photographs. Us sleeping peacefully in our bed. Us eating dinner at the kitchen table. Us watching television in the living room, completely unaware and vulnerable. One photograph showed him standing in our bedroom doorway while we slept, taken with a camera timer. Long arms hanging at his sides exactly like Benji had described. They caught him 3 days later attempting to break into another family's attic 2 streets over from us. He'd done this before to many families. At the police station, detectives told us he'd actually been watching our house since before we even moved in. He'd been living in that attic when we first toured the property with our realtor. He'd watched the previous family for 11 months before they moved away suddenly.
My wife found a pregnancy test in the trash. Positive. She had a hysterectomy. We have no daughters. It was just me and her in the house. She held it up with 2 fingers like it was radioactive, standing in the bathroom doorway while I was brushing my teeth. Her face was completely blank, but her hands were trembling so hard I could see it from across the room. What is this? Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before everything falls apart completely. I stared at the pink plus sign, and my brain just stopped working. I have no idea. You have no idea. She said it flat, not a question. More like she was testing how ridiculous the words sounded out loud. Babe, I genuinely don't know where that came from. She set it on the counter and crossed her arms, leaning against the door frame like she needed it to hold her up. I had my uterus removed 3 years ago. I physically cannot be pregnant. We don't have kids. No daughters. No nieces staying over. No friends crashing in the guest room. Nobody has been in this house except you and me for weeks. I could see exactly where her mind was going, and my stomach dropped through the floor. You think I'm cheating on you? What else am I supposed to think? A positive pregnancy test doesn't just materialize in our bathroom trash. Someone took that test. Someone who can actually get pregnant. And since that person obviously isn't me, I need you to explain who the hell it is. I grabbed her shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. I would never do that to you. You know that. You know me better than anyone in this world. She pulled away from my touch like it burned her. Then explain it. Give me literally any explanation that makes sense, because right now, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I couldn't explain it. For 3 days, we barely spoke. She slept in the guest room with the door locked. I could hear her crying through the walls at night, but when I knocked, she told me to go away. I tore my brain apart trying to figure out how a pregnancy test ended up in our house. I checked if maybe someone had visited and used our bathroom, but nobody had been over in weeks. I called my sister asking if she'd stopped by when I wasn't home. She hadn't. I even wondered if I was losing my mind, if maybe I'd done something I couldn't remember. On the 4th day, I bought a security camera and installed it in the hallway without telling my wife. I knew she'd think I was being paranoid or trying to create fake evidence to cover my tracks. I just needed answers because my marriage was dying right in front of me. A week went by with nothing unusual on the footage. Just me and my wife moving through the house like strangers, avoiding eye contact, speaking in single syllables. Then on day 8, I checked the footage from the previous night and my blood went completely cold. At 2:47 a.m., a figure walked down our hallway. It wasn't my wife. It wasn't me. It was a young woman, maybe early 20s, with dark hair pulled back and pale skin that almost glowed in the night vision. She walked right past the camera like like she belonged there, completely comfortable, went into the bathroom, stayed for 4 minutes, then walked toward the back of the house and disappeared. I ran to show my wife immediately. She went white as a ghost, her hand covering her mouth. Who is that? How did she get in our house? We called the police. 2 officers searched everywhere and found nothing at first. No forced entry, no broken locks. But when they checked the basement, one officer called us down with a voice that made my skin crawl. Behind our water heater, hidden in a crawl space we didn't know existed, they found a sleeping bag, empty water bottles, granola bar wrappers, and women's clothes. Someone had been living in our basement. The officer explained this happens more than people realize. Someone finds an access point and moves in. They learn your schedule and only come out when you're asleep. My wife grabbed my arm so hard her nails broke skin. For how long? They found a journal. The entries went back 4 months. 4 months this woman had been living beneath us, using our bathroom at night, eating our food, listening through the vents. The pregnancy test was hers. Police tracked her through fingerprints. Her name was Della, 23, homeless, after aging out of foster care. She found the crawl space from a broken vent outside. When interviewed, she said she never meant harm. She needed somewhere warm. She felt like she knew us, like family. She'd been pregnant, but lost the baby, and the test was from that night. She was too scared to take it elsewhere. We moved within a month. We couldn't sleep there knowing someone had been watching us. Sometimes I still wake at 2:47 a.m. and check the hallway. The new house has no basement.
The dentist looked at my daughter's x-ray and said, I need to ask you something in private. He closed the door and asked where we adopted her from. We didn't adopt her. I stared at him completely confused while my 6-year-old daughter Bria sat in the waiting room coloring pictures of unicorns. I told him Bria was absolutely my biological child, and I had the stretch marks and 18 hours of labor to prove it. His face went pale and he asked if I was certain. I laughed because what kind of question was that? He turned the x-ray screen toward me and pointed at something I did not understand. He explained that Bria had a specific bone structure anomaly that was genetic and extremely rare. It only appeared in certain ethnic populations from a small region in Eastern Europe. My husband and I were both from families that had been in America for 5 generations, with ancestry from Western Europe and West Africa. There was no possible way our biological child could have this marker. I told him he must be mistaken, or maybe the x-rays got switched with another patient. He showed me her name clearly labeled on the image. He said he had seen this anomaly exactly twice in 30 years of practice, both times in children adopted from the same orphanage overseas. I drove home in a daze with Bria chattering happily about her clean teeth in the backseat. That night after she went to bed, I pulled out her birth certificate and the photos from the hospital. There she was, red and wrinkled, being placed on my chest moments after delivery. I was there. My husband was there. The doctors and nurses were there. She came out of my body. I called my mother and asked if there was any chance I was adopted. She sounded offended and said absolutely not, and reminded me she had the home videos of my birth to prove it. I could not sleep for 3 days. Finally, I ordered a DNA test kit and swabbed both myself and Bria while telling her it was for a fun science project. The results came back 2 weeks later and destroyed everything I thought I knew. Bria was not biologically related to me. There was 0 shared DNA. I took the results to my husband and watched his face crumble. He demanded we do another test, thinking there must be contamination. The second test confirmed it, then the third. Our daughter was not our daughter. We hired a lawyer who specialized in hospital negligence cases. She started investigating the hospital where I gave birth and discovered something horrifying. A nurse who worked in the maternity ward during that time had been fired 3 years later for suspicious behavior. There were rumors she had been involved in some kind of illegal adoption scheme, but nothing was ever proven. The hospital had buried the investigation to avoid liability. Our lawyer found 4 other families who gave birth at that hospital during the same period with the same nurse on duty. 3 of them agreed to DNA testing. 2 of those families discovered their children were also not biologically theirs. Someone had been switching babies. My biological daughter was out there somewhere being raised by strangers who thought she was theirs. And the child I had loved and raised for 6 years belonged to another family entirely. I cannot describe what that knowledge did to me. Bria was my daughter in every way that mattered. I had held her through fevers and nightmares and first days of school. The thought of losing her made me physically ill. But somewhere another mother was raising my biological child without knowing the truth. The lawsuit revealed that the nurse had been running a private adoption operation for wealthy couples who wanted babies quickly without paperwork. She would switch healthy newborns with babies from mothers she deemed unfit or undeserving. My baby had been given to a couple who paid $50,000 for a healthy infant. The nurse died of cancer before she could face charges. The hospital settled with all affected families for an undisclosed amount that will never be enough. We eventually found my biological daughter through DNA databases. Her name is Ren, and she is being raised by a loving family who had no idea she was stolen. We met once, and it was the strangest experience of my life. She looked exactly like my baby photos, but she was a stranger. Her parents are good people who were also victims of this nightmare. We agreed that disrupting the children's lives would only cause more trauma. Bria knows the truth now, but she still calls me mom. We tell her she has 2 families who love her, and that is more than most people get. Some nights I look at her sleeping and wonder about the daughter I never got to raise. Other nights I am just grateful for the one I have. The dentist apologized for turning our lives upside down. I told him he did the right thing. Some truths need to be told even when they break everything you thought was real. The detective showed me a security camera photo and asked, "Do you recognize this woman breaking into your house?" It was me. I was asleep at the time. Detective Ruiz slid the grainy photograph across the cold metal table, and my stomach dropped instantly to the floor. The timestamp in the corner read 3:47 a.m. last Tuesday night. The woman in the photo wore my pajamas, the blue ones with little moons that I wear to bed every single night without fail. She had my exact haircut, my exact build, and was clearly using a key to unlock my back door like she owned the place. "That's completely impossible," I whispered with my voice shaking badly. I was in my bed that entire night. I take prescription sleep medication every single night. The detective's expression stayed completely neutral and unreadable throughout our entire conversation. "Your neighbor's security camera caught this footage last week. She reported seeing someone matching your exact description entering through your back door multiple times over the past month, always happening between 3 and 4 a.m. without exception." My hands started trembling uncontrollably on the table surface. I suddenly remembered waking up feeling completely exhausted lately, despite getting full nights of sleep, finding unexplained dirt on the bottom of my feet some mornings, discovering mysterious scratches on my arms I couldn't explain. "There's more you need to see," she said with a serious tone in her voice. She showed me another photograph of me standing motionless in my own kitchen, with completely empty and vacant eyes, like absolutely nobody was home behind them anymore. "Your neighbor finally called us because last night she watched you walk directly into her yard and just stand there frozen for 20 straight minutes, staring directly at her bedroom window without moving at all." I felt physically sick to my stomach hearing this. I had absolutely no no memory of doing any of this whatsoever. Have you ever experienced any sleepwalking before in your life? Never. Not once in my entire 32 years. She opened a manila folder and showed me a photo of a woman who looked exactly like me in every single way possible. Same face, same eyes, same small distinctive scar above my left eyebrow that I got falling off my bike when I was 7 years old. Do you happen to have a twin sister? My blood ran absolutely cold in my veins. No, I'm an only child. According to sealed hospital records, your mother actually gave birth to twins 32 years ago. One baby was kept and raised. The other was given up for closed adoption just 3 days after birth. The entire room started spinning around me. I gripped the table edge hard to steady myself. That's completely impossible. My parents would have told me something that important. The adoption was completely sealed by court order. The baby went to a family living 2 states over. Her legal name is Ren Hollister. She was reported missing from a psychiatric facility exactly 6 weeks ago today. 6 weeks. That was exactly when I started waking up exhausted, when dirt started appearing on my feet, when the scratches started showing up. She has a documented history of obsessive behavior. The detective continued carefully. Her adoptive parents both passed away 3 years ago. After that, she became completely fixated on finding her biological family. When she finally discovered she had an identical twin sister, she didn't take that news well. I thought about items moved around in my house lately, food missing from my refrigerator, the constant feeling of being watched. She had been inside my home while I slept feet away. We found her hidden campsite in the woods behind your property. She watched you over a month, learned your schedule, somehow copied your house key. Where is she right now? The detective hesitated before answering. That hesitation terrified me more than anything else. We don't know. The campsite was abandoned this morning. She left behind hundreds of photographs of you taken through your windows while you slept, showered, ate dinner. She also left a note. She slid paper toward me. The handwriting matched mine perfectly. We were supposed to be together. Mom chose wrong. I'm fixing her mistake. See you soon, sister. Tears streamed down my face. That night, I stayed at a hotel under a fake name, checked every lock, pushed the dresser against the door. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo appeared. Me sleeping in the hotel bed, taken from inside the room. I looked up slowly. The closet door was open. It hadn't been before. Then breathing from the darkness, a whisper in my voice. Hello, sister. She stepped out wearing my face. By morning, only one remains. The last thing I felt was hands around my throat, then black. The home inspector found a room behind our basement wall. There was a mattress, empty water bottles, and a phone charger plugged in. We had lived in this house for 3 years. 3 years of hearing strange sounds at night that my husband Dominic insisted were just the pipes settling. 3 years of food disappearing from our pantry that I blamed on my own forgetfulness. 3 years of our dog barking at the basement door for absolutely no apparent reason at all hours. The inspector's face was completely pale when he called us down. You need to see this immediately, he whispered, voice trembling. Behind what we thought was solid concrete, there was a hidden room about 6 feet by 8 feet. The mattress was stained and sunken in the middle like someone had been sleeping on it for many months. Dozens of empty water bottles lined one wall in eerily neat rows. A phone charger was plugged into an extension cord running through a hole in the ceiling. The worst part? Photographs were taped all over the wall. Photos of me cooking dinner, of Dominic watching television, of our 7-year-old daughter Ren sleeping in her bed. I screamed so loud the inspector dropped his flashlight and it shattered on the concrete. Dominic grabbed me and pulled me upstairs while calling 911. Police arrived within minutes and began searching the hidden room thoroughly. They found more evidence that made my stomach turn completely. Whoever lived there had been watching us through small holes drilled into walls throughout our entire house. One hole looked directly into our bathroom, another into Ren's bedroom where she changed every day, another into our master bedroom where we slept every night completely unaware. The detective pulled us aside while forensics worked. We found a journal, she said quietly. It details your routines going back 18 months. What time you wake up, when you leave for work, when you shower, when your daughter is home alone after school. My legs gave out and Dominic caught me before I hit the floor. Who would do this? Dominic demanded, shaking with rage. We couldn't think of anyone. We were boring suburban parents with ordinary lives. The detective asked if we noticed anything unusual recently. That's when I remembered something that made my blood freeze. 2 weeks ago, I came home early with a migraine. I thought I heard footsteps in the basement, but nothing responded when I called out. I convinced myself it was imagination, but I remembered something else. The basement door lock was on the wrong side that day, like someone was trying to keep something in, not out. The lock, I whispered. Someone moved it to the inside. Dominic shook his head. I never touched that lock. The detective stepped away to make calls. Minutes later, more officers arrived with a K9 unit. The dog tracked a scent from the hidden room, through the basement, up the stairs, and straight to Ren's bedroom. Ren wasn't home. She was at her friend Lila's house for a play date. I called immediately with shaking hands. Is Ren still there? She left an hour ago, Lila's mother said. A man picked her up. He said he was her uncle. We don't have brothers. Dominic is an only child. So am I. My vision went black around the edges. The next 4 hours were the worst of my existence. Police issued an Amber Alert across 3 counties. They traced the phone charger to a prepaid phone purchased near Ren's school. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speaker with the detective listening. Mommy? Ren's voice small and terrified. Baby, where are you? The nice man says I have to stay with him now. He says he loves me more than you do. A male voice came on, calm and cold. She's mine now. I've been patient. Don't bother looking. The line went dead, but he made one mistake. 47 seconds. Long enough to triangulate. Police tracked the signal to an abandoned warehouse 11 miles away. When they breached, they found Ren on a mattress, coloring, completely unharmed. The man tried running, but officers tackled him instantly. His name was Garrett Kimball. He worked as a janitor at Ren's school before being fired for boundary issues with students. He lived in our walls for 18 months, watching us, waiting. Ren doesn't remember most of it. Her therapist says that's normal. We moved 3 states away, but every night I check every wall in our house. I knock on them, listening for hollow spaces. I will never stop listening. The lawyer said my grandmother left me her house. I said she's still alive. He went pale and said, "Ma'am, she died 3 years ago." I laughed out loud because this had to be some kind of clerical error. My grandmother called me every single Sunday without fail. We had dinner together just last month at her little blue house on the corner of Maple Street. I pulled out my phone and showed him her contact with all our recent calls listed right there. He stared at the screen for an uncomfortably long time before gesturing for me to sit down. His hands were trembling slightly as he pulled out a death certificate dated exactly 3 years ago. Her signature on the will matched perfectly with documents from decades prior. Then he showed me photographs from a funeral that I had apparently attended. There I was wearing a black dress and standing beside a mahogany casket with white lilies draped across the top. My face in the photo looked absolutely devastated and tear-streaked, but I had no memory of this moment whatsoever. None at all. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through more photos. My mother was sobbing in one picture. My uncle was standing at a podium giving what looked like a eulogy in another. I was clutching a bouquet of roses in a third photo with mascara running down my cheeks. The lawyer asked if I was feeling all right, and I mumbled something about needing fresh air before stumbling out to the parking lot. I called my mother immediately from my car, and she answered on the second ring with her usual cheerful hello. I asked her point blank when Grandma died, and she went completely silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she said Grandma passed away 3 years ago and asked why I was suddenly bringing this up now. I told her I had just eaten dinner with Grandma last month at her house. The silence on the other end was absolutely deafening. Then my mother started crying and demanded to know exactly where I was. She said she was coming to get me right now and told me not to move. I sat in my car with my head spinning, trying desperately to remember anything about attending a funeral. Nothing came to me, but I remembered Sunday phone calls filled with laughter and stories. I remembered holiday dinners with her famous apple pie. I remembered her lavender perfume and her warm hugs, and the way she always managed to burn the dinner rolls no matter how carefully she watched them. My mother arrived 20 minutes later with my father right behind her. They both looked absolutely terrified as they approached my car. My mother grabbed my hands and begged me to describe my last visit with Grandma in detail. I told her we had pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans. We watched her favorite game show together like always. She gave me a blue sweater she had been knitting for months. My mother collapsed against the car, sobbing harder. She said Grandma always made that exact pot roast every time I visited as a child. She said Grandma never missed an episode of that game show in 40 years. Then she said Grandma had been knitting me a blue sweater when she died but never finished it. My father pulled out his phone with a grim expression and showed me a recent photo of Grandma's house. The place was completely abandoned. Windows boarded up with plywood, front lawn overgrown with weeds taller than my waist. He said nobody had lived there since she passed and the bank foreclosed 2 years ago. I told him that was impossible because I was just there 4 weeks ago. He drove us to the house that afternoon. It looked exactly like the photo, abandoned and decaying. A foreclosure notice was stapled to the front door. I walked up the porch where we always sat drinking lemonade. The chairs were rusted and falling apart. I looked through the dirty window. Furniture covered in sheets, dust everywhere inches thick, no signs of life for years. My mother took me to a doctor the next day. They ran every test. Brain scans and blood work all came back normal. The doctor asked about stress and trauma. He asked about drug use and sleep patterns. Nothing explained 3 years of vivid memories with a dead woman. My phone rang late that night. Caller ID said Grandma. I answered trembling. Her voice came through exactly as I remembered. She asked why I missed Sunday dinner. She said she made pot roast. I recorded the call and played it for my parents. They heard only static. My mother called the number back. Disconnected. I went to that abandoned house alone the next week. I sat on the broken porch and cried for hours. The sun started setting and I stood to leave. That is when I saw it. A freshly knitted blue sweater folded on the porch swing, still warm. A note inside said, "I love you, sweetheart. See you Sunday." The moment my mother said she deserved my shower gifts more than me, I knew she'd lost her mind. I just didn't know how badly until 5 minutes later. I was 8 months pregnant and surrounded by pink streamers in my childhood living room, and I already had a bad feeling about the whole thing. My mother had insisted on throwing me this shower herself, and I agreed against my better judgment because she swore she wanted to do something nice for me. My mom had me when she was 14, which meant she was now 38, and had spent my entire life making sure every room she entered revolved around her. Her best friend had helped plan every detail, and the two of them had been inseparable since before I was born. Her son was practically like a little brother to me growing up since we spent every holiday together, and looking around the room, I genuinely thought I was surrounded by people who cared about my baby. I had just unwrapped a hand-knit blanket from my husband's grandmother when my mother stood up and clinked her glass with a fork. She cleared her throat and said, "I have some exciting news of my own," and before I could process what was happening, she announced that she was also pregnant. The room went silent as every guest tried to figure out if this was a joke, but my mother just stood there glowing like she expected applause. She walked over to the gift table and started picking up packages, and when my aunt asked what she was doing, my mother said, "Well, I planned this whole shower and I'm going to need baby supplies too, so I'm taking what I need." I finally found my voice and said, "You cannot be serious right now," but my mother just shrugged and said, "You're young. You have plenty of time to get more stuff, but I'm going to be a geriatric pregnancy and I need all the help I can get." She actually used the word geriatric, like it was supposed to make us feel sorry for her while she loaded a bag with my daughter's things. She picked up the car seat that my mother-in-law had spent weeks researching and said, "Oh, this is the exact one I wanted." And my husband stood up and said, "You need to put everything back right now." My mother laughed and said, "Relax, it's just baby stuff. You guys can always buy more." I asked her what was wrong with her, why she always had to make everything about herself, and she rolled her eyes like I was the one being dramatic. One of my cousins finally asked, "So who's the father?" And my mother suddenly got very quiet. She laughed nervously and said, "It's complicated." And when her best friend pressed her on why she was being so secretive after announcing everything else, my mother just kept fidgeting with the ribbon on one of the stolen gifts without making eye contact with anyone. The front door opened and a young guy walked in carrying a case of sparkling cider. It took me a second to recognize him because I had not seen him since he left for college last year. But then I realized it was my mother's best friend's 19-year-old son, the one who had been like a little brother to me my whole life. He stopped when he felt the tension in the room, looking around at all the faces staring at him, and then at my mother who had gone completely pale. He asked, "What's going on? Why does everyone look so weird?" And his mother started to say something about my mom making an announcement. His face broke into a huge grin, and he said, "Oh, she told you guys?" And he walked over to my mother and put his arm around her and announced, "I'm gonna be a dad." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. His mother, my mom's best friend who had helped plan this entire shower, made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. The room erupted into chaos while he looked around genuinely confused about why people were not congratulating him. His mother stood up slowly, and her voice was shaking when she asked, "Are you telling me you've been sleeping with my son?" My mother tried to stammer out some explanation about how he was 19 and technically an adult, but his mother cut her off screaming, "You were in the delivery room when he was born. You watched him take his first steps. You've known him since before he could talk." She grabbed her purse and said, "Get in the car right now," then turned back to my mother and said, "You are disgusting, and I will be calling a lawyer first thing Monday morning to see what my options are, because as far as I'm concerned, you are a predator." My mother had tears streaming down her face and said, "You can't help who you fall in love with," and her best friend got right in her face and said, "You can rot," before dragging her bewildered son out the front door. My mother stood alone in the middle of the room with everyone staring at her in complete horror. She looked at me like she expected me to defend her, like I was somehow supposed to take her side after everything she had just done. I stood up and calmly took the bag of gifts out of her hands and said, "I think it's time for you to leave." She opened her mouth to say something, but I just pointed at the door and waited until she finally walked out.